I'm making you go away. Just another war, another fire. You're not a warrior, you're a gun for hire. Another war, another victim. Won't see me coming. It's too late to fight.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nate the Effing Great, and welcome to another GC Extra. Basically, taking Game Changer extra content and making them into small little mini episodes because why not? So, for this edition, we will actually be talking about a new segment that I would like to do called Rebook It, where basically I take something that had the potential to be just astronomically phenomenal, but unfortunately either fell subpar or just fell crash and burned. And I would rebook it because I am indeed an effing genius, no ding required. So for this week we're going to be looking at rebooking Scott Steiner in his first year in the WWE. So basically what happened with Scott Steiner? Well, he debuted back in Survivor Series 2002 at Madison Square Garden, which was probably the best way for him to come on, taking out Matt Hardy and Christopher Nowinski in one of the best debuts that you could possibly have. And people definitely knew who he was, and they definitely knew that he was there to make a statement. Over the next few months, he would eventually go on to these Raw and SmackDown contract negotiations with Stephanie McMahon and Eric Bischoff, which also escalated into a very uncomfortable possible rape scenario between Scott Steiner and Stephanie. If you don't believe me, check it out on YouTube. It is not one of those things that I am over-exaggerating with. So basically, Scott Steiner would go on to sign with Monday Night Raw in his first feud, Triple H. And of course, this being 2003, this is during the era of terror that Triple H was definitely just, yeah. So basically what happened was that we got back-to-back title matches between Scott Steiner and Triple H, which were possibly the worst title matches that people had ever seen. The fact that Scott Steiner was also a babyface did not help out at all. He definitely was one of those guys that a lot of people saw as very untechnically gifted, I guess you could say. You definitely saw a lot of the flaws if you look at their match at Royal Rumble and No Way Out 2003. From there, he would go on to have a feud with Test over Stacy Keibler, which was, again, one of those deals in which it wasn't as good as people really thought it could be. I mean, it just was not something that I really enjoyed. Basically, Scott Steiner would defend the honor of Stacy Keibler. Test was just this, evil boyfriend, I guess you could say. Scott Steiner would win Stacy Keibler's services at Bad Blood, but then lose them a few months later on Raw, and then he would have to be Test's basically manservant at Unforgiven if he lost, which he did. And then he eventually turned heel, and his career just didn't really go anywhere. I mean, they teamed up for a bit, and then Scott Steiner was in the Rumble, and then after that he got injured, and he really was never really seen in my eyes until Destination X 2006, I believe. Yeah, that sounds about right. Probably about 2 years later. So he was probably off recuperating from an injury or something else, really. So what was really the issue here? Well, the thing is that they were definitely trying to force Scott Steiner to be this top babyface, which he was definitely not one of those people that really could fit the, babyface qualities. If you look especially at where Scott Steiner was near the end of his career and venture in WCW, he was definitely one of the most over heels that they had really had. So what is something that we can do with this? Well, I think the best thing that you can do is make Scott Steiner into a big a heel as Triple H was. And I'm just going to tell this to you guys right now, will he be getting a world title shot? He will only get one world title shot. And that will be a little later on when he was a little more developed. So how are we going to rebook this? Well, gave you a little bit of a preview, so let's just get right into it. So first off, I wouldn't really change anything about his debut and as well as his contract negotiations, except for he will say this. He says that he's going to enter the Royal Rumble as a free agent, and he will decide which championship that he will go after. So you're immediately giving the Royal Rumble a bit more prestige, and especially now that Scott Steiner is a free agent, he's going to be one of those guys who can challenge either for the world title at WrestleMania or for the WWE title at WrestleMania. Now, obviously, this will beg the question, what does that mean for Triple H going into the Royal Rumble as well as No Way Out? Well, it's really kind of simple, actually. Basically, what you could do is you can have Shawn Michaels basically get his rematch for the world title because they had a great 3 Stages of Hell match at Armageddon. So basically have him get his rematch clause at the Royal Rumble, but you would still not change the fact that, we're building up this plan to have Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels battle at WrestleMania. So basically Chris Jericho cost Shawn Michaels the matchup, and then a month later you can again have the same kind of circumstances, but have Chris Jericho challenge Triple H and Shawn Michaels gets involved. And you still keep the storyline basically still relevant, in which you see, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels, they have a legitimate beef with each other. You could still have Chris Jericho do the great promo where he basically says, I was told that I was going to be the next Shawn Michaels, but I wanted to be the first Chris Jericho, which was awesome. Anyway, try not to detract from too much. So Scott Steiner goes into the Royal Rumble as the 29th entrant. Now, how I would book Scott Steiner in this Royal Rumble matchup, obviously not going to have him be this, technical guy, but I would basically have him do what Brock Lesnar's been doing for so long in a lot of his matches, basically make him just this mayor of Suplex City, just having him, T-bone after T-bone, just throwing people around, gorilla pressing people out of the ring. He just looks like a massive guy who is just going to be a hard force to defeat, and that just, builds up to it. So we basically build up to the number 30 entrant, and Scott Steiner has locked the Steiner recliner on Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar looks like he's just moments away from passing out. Then we reach the number 30 entrant, 3, 2, 1, and we hear, "Dead man walking, you've done it now, you've gone and made a big..." Yeah, The Undertaker, he made his return at the Royal Rumble. We are going to be keeping that. We're not going to change that at all. So Undertaker comes out, and we have this big stare down between Scott Steiner and The Undertaker in the Royal Rumble. Scott Steiner's been the dominant guy throughout this 1.5-minute, 2-minute deal, and Undertaker is, this is his yard. He and Scott Steiner, they slug it out for quite a bit, but Scott Steiner is the one that gets the upper hand. He gets T-bones, he gets a nice, Steiner recliner involved, and it boils down to them reaching to the Final Four, in which we see The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar representing SmackDown, and we see Scott Steiner and Batista representing Raw. Batista would eventually get eliminated by Scott Steiner, and it looks like Scott Steiner is just going to throw out Brock Lesnar, but The Undertaker comes from behind and throws out Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner is in just total disbelief. He is just livid at the fact that he was so close to getting what he wanted, but The Undertaker screwed him out of it. Brock Lesnar would, of course, eliminate The Undertaker. We keep that the same. We cannot, change Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle. That was one of the best matches they had at WrestleMania, so we're going to keep that storyline the same. So, in the build-up to No Way Out, nobody's heard from Scott Steiner. Nobody has seen Scott Steiner. Basically, it feels like Scott Steiner just fell off the face of the earth. You have, segments where Eric Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon, they're trying to get a hold of Scott Steiner. But Scott Steiner is going to be taken off of TV until No Way Out. Now, obviously, if you remember No Way Out 2003, Undertaker had a matchup with The Big Show. We are keeping that. The end result where Big Show gets choked out by The Undertaker, that's fine. We're going to end the rivalry between the two of them there. The moment that The Undertaker has his hand raised, match is over, boom, out comes Scott Steiner. He's got his signature, lead pipe that he usually has, comes out and just wham, knocks down The Undertaker, just beats him down, locks in his Steiner recliner, just leaving him a bloody mess. And it seems like Scott Steiner has decided to sign with SmackDown. The SmackDown following No Way Out, we hear Scott Steiner say that he will sign with SmackDown the night after WrestleMania because he wants to have a big impact. He wants his first matchup to be against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. So we build up Scott Steiner versus The Undertaker. And at that time, this would be a really good matchup to have. And it would give them a little more time to rebuild a little bit on Nathan Jones because obviously he was not ready to get into the ring at that time. So Nathan Jones is getting a little more time to actually get prepped for wrestling. And I know that takes, A-Train and Big Show off the WrestleMania card. But in all honesty, a handicap match between Undertaker and Big Show and A-Train, it just didn't really have that much of a feel to it. The fact that it was even scheduled as a tag team match made it kind of weird, really. So we have a one-on-one matchup at WrestleMania 19 between Scott Steiner and The Undertaker. Matchup happens, and what you would expect, Scott Steiner is just bulldozing through The Undertaker. He's just beating him down. Undertaker gets a few bits of offense in, but Scott Steiner finds a way to just, manhandle The Undertaker. We reach the point where Scott Steiner locks in the Steiner recliner to The Undertaker. He is just destroying The Undertaker. And it seems like Undertaker's just about to pass out, but Undertaker finds a way to prevail, and he actually finds a way to, choke slam, tombstone Scott Steiner. I know that seems kind of one of those things where it's like, well, that seems kind of dumb that Undertaker would just, hit those two moves and he would win. You have to remember, back then, it really didn't matter too much that, you hit your moves out of nowhere like that. Plus, it was The Undertaker. He just knew how to make anything work. So, having Scott Steiner lose The Undertaker but make him look impressive with The Undertaker at WrestleMania definitely adds a huge credibility factor to his resume. So, we move on, and people are thinking, well, obviously he's going to sign with SmackDown. The following night on Monday Night Raw, he actually debuts the same night as Bill Goldberg does. So you have not one but two surprises there. Scott Steiner comes out and he cuts the best heel promo that he has, where he basically says, yeah, I was thinking about signing with SmackDown, but the thing was, I'm just too good for that. The Undertaker got lucky. There is no way that The Undertaker could beat me. I have the world's largest arms, and, blah, blah, blah. I'm the big, bad, booty daddy. Holla if you hear me. Blah, blah, blah. You get what I'm saying. So, Scott Steiner actually signs with Monday Night Raw. So, Scott Steiner goes through a couple of jobbers every now and then. And we build up to a interesting storyline between Scott Steiner and Test. So, obviously, this is where things got a little bit meh, but I think they just needed the right kind of storyline. And I definitely still want to keep it where they're fighting over Stacy Keibler, but for different reasons. Obviously, Test is going to be the babyface in this situation, and Scott Steiner is going to be the massive heel. So we get a build-up into Judgment Day, where Scott Steiner wants to face Test, but he says, you know what, I don't, wrestle for free. I want a price. I want, your quote-unquote B to be put on the line here. So basically, the build-up here is Scott Steiner has just been disrespecting Stacy Keibler at every which way, and Test is just livid. He has had it with it. He's tried beating down Scott Steiner, but Steiner finds a way to either get out of Dodge, or he finds a way to just sneak up on Test and beat him down. So, build up to Judgment Day. Test agrees, but he did it out of, spite and rage because he wants anything to just get his hands on Scott Steiner. So we build up the matchup, Judgment Day, Scott Steiner versus Test. During the matchup, the referee gets knocked down, and it seems like Test is going to get the win with the big boot, but Scott Steiner is able to grab a lead pipe, cracks it over Test's skull, and locks in the Steiner recliner to Test, and the referee, calls for the bell. Match is over, and Test is out cold. Scott Steiner gets the win, and he gets the services of Stacy Keibler. Now, after this matchup is over, actually, Scott Steiner grabs his lead pipe, and he does not let up. He just beats down on Test just to show that he is the dominant. He is the freak. He is Freakzilla. He's just this guy who's going to show this, ruthless aggression. So this will take Test off of TV.